Adrenaline Rush is a skill that boosts your action speed by 25% for 8 seconds. Action speed includes attack speed, weapon switching speed, and utility item speed. We'll mostly be focusing on the 25% attack speed increase. You can think of this 25% attack speed as a 25% increase in potential DPS. I say potential because there's no guarantee that someone who uses a skill will be able to make use of its full effect. Sometimes you need to play footsies, or reposition, or your opponent is just way too good at dodging, but the same goes for every skill that boosts DPS. If we want to directly compare skills, the potential DPS is the most useful metric. Adrenaline Rush also comes with an 8% penalty to attack speed and a 4% penalty to movement speed for 4 seconds after its primary effect is over. This skill is also a one-time use, requiring the same amount of time at a campfire as Second Wind to recharge. Adrenaline Rush is a very unique skill. No other skill in the game comes with this type of downside. In fact, the only skills to come with any sort of downside at all are Rage and Reckless Attack. We've gone over how Rage's downside works situationally before, and while Reckless Attack's downside is a true downside, it only exists as long as the skill is active. If the Barbarian hits their target first, then the downside vanishes, allowing it to be completely circumvented. This is what I mean when I say that Adrenaline Rush is the only skill with this type of downside. No other skill in the game puts their user into a state where they are strictly worse than if they hadn't used the skill at all. Every other skill with a downside only has that downside active at the same time as the skill's beneficial effects, and once the good effect wears off, the bad effect wears off too. The second half of Adrenaline Rush's uniqueness is the one-time use. There are only 3 other skills in the game with limited uses, that being Second Wind, Field Ration, and Caltrops. Only one of these skills is limited to a single use, and that's Second Wind. Second Wind being limited makes a lot of sense, as being able to recover 50% of your HP mid-fight without having to swap to an item or spend time in a long animation is extremely powerful. Similarly, Field Ration provides Ranger with 25 HP in a very quick burst, is limited to 3 uses, and has a cooldown between uses so that it can't be used all at once to instantly get 75 HP. Both of these skills are powerful burst healing skills, which is more than enough justification for their limited uses. And then we have Caltrops. Caltrops are not nearly powerful enough to warrant limited uses, but it at least makes some logical sense, as they function as traps that stay on the ground, like a ranger's hunting trap. So even though the effect isn't all that great, its utility as a long-term trap gives it at least some reason to be limited. So that brings us to a question regarding Adrenaline Rush. Are its effects powerful enough that a downside is required to balance it? Let's test that question by comparing it to other similar skills. The first skill we'll be comparing to is Smite. Smite grants plus 10 magic damage to the cleric's attacks for 7 seconds. At base kit, this 10 damage is actually 14 damage, thanks to the cleric's high will stat giving them a 40% magic damage bonus. This DPS increase's significance varies depending on your gear. On a default cleric, you're getting over 50% more damage per swing. Using better gear, your physical damage will be different, and so will your smite damage, as any increase to magic damage will also affect the damage dealt by smite. So while it's hard to pinpoint exactly how impactful smite will be, by default it is at least a 50% increase, and can become better or worse depending on your gear. In terms of penalties and cooldowns, this skill has no penalties, and is infinite use with a 16-second cooldown. Next we have Weakpoint Attack. Weakpoint Attack boosts the damage of the rogue's next attack by 50%, and then reduces the victim's defenses by 50% for 5 seconds. My sources tell me that Weakpoint's defense reduction is a 0.5 times multiplier for the target's physical damage reduction percentage. So, for example, if they had 10% reduction, it'd become 5%. If they had 80%, it'd become 40%. This means that Weakpoint is another ability whose effectiveness varies based on a sliding scale, only this scale is determined by your opponent's gear, not your own. With this scale, we can see that Weakpoint is not particularly powerful at the lower armor ratings, but jumps to extreme levels as armor rating goes up. It also provides a flat damage bonus to the first hit, giving it slightly more benefit than is shown here. Overall, its damage increase isn't particularly impressive at the more common armor levels, but proves to be exceptionally powerful on heavily armored players, giving it a powerful niche. In terms of penalties and cooldowns, this skill has no penalties and is infinite use with a 24-second cooldown. Now, the last of the 3 skills we'll be looking at, and the most directly comparable one to Adrenaline Rush, Quickfire, a ranger skill. Just like Adrenaline Rush, Quickfire boosts the user's action speed for 8 seconds, only in this case, the increase is 50%. This is double the boost for the same amount of time, so we might expect penalties similar to Adrenaline Rush's. This skill has no penalties, and is infinite use with a 24-second cooldown. With all of this in mind, it's probably safe to say, in comparison to other skills with similar effects, that Adrenaline Rush does not deserve the penalties it has. Having only one use that needs to be recharged at a campfire severely limits its usefulness. for a reward that isn't nearly as impactful as Second Wind's 50% heal. And the overheat period after the perk's effects is very punishing, especially considering that Adrenaline Rush is not as powerful as other skills that also directly increase DPS. Yeah, the action speed debuff can be countered by running the dual wield perk, and the movement speed penalty can be countered by using the breakthrough skill, but this requires the fighter to give up both sprint and second wind, as well as one of their perk slots, just to get a single time 25% action speed boost for 8 seconds with no drawbacks. Would Adrenaline Rush become too powerful if it were cleansed of its downsides? It would be very difficult to topple Sprint and Second Wind, as mobility and burst healing are both incredibly powerful effects. At the very least, it would give more offense-oriented fighter players a consistent option, and that would go a long way in giving fighters more build variety.